My name is Erin Whitaker. I'm 28 years old, and for the past 6 months, I haven't picked up a single call from my parents. Not once. I lie stretched out on the small second-hand couch in my Richmond apartment, one hand wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea that's long since gone cold. The other hand rests on my stomach, steadying the shallow rhythm of my breath. I can hear the phone vibrating on the coffee table beside me, a stuttering buzz every few seconds over and over. Mom, Dad, Chase. The same three names blinking like warning lights I've trained myself to ignore. The afternoon light filters softly through the old window panes, the edges of the glass warped just enough to catch glints of sun. Outside, the street hums faintly. Someone walking a dog, the occasional car rolling past. In here, everything is still. Peaceful if I don't look at the screen. 6 months. That's how long it's been since I walked out of their house. No slammed doors, no screaming. Not even a single confrontation. Just a quiet exit, the way a shadow disappears when the light moves. I packed a duffel bag, a few changes of clothes, my worn-out laptop, and my finance notebook with pages of ledgers and budgets. I used to balance their emergencies. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say a word. I knew they wouldn't ask why I was leaving. And they didn't. Back then, I kept waiting for one of them to notice, to stop me at the door to ask where I was going. But no one looked up. Mom was on the phone with Chase, probably arranging to cover another of his bills. Dad was scrolling through the car insurance spreadsheet, muttering about the rising premiums. And Chase, as usual, was sprawled across the living room couch, gaming headset on feet propped up like the house owed him comfort. I had been invisible for years. Reliable? Yes. Useful? Absolutely. But never once asked how I was doing. I used to think being the dependable one meant something. That if I just kept doing the right thing, sending money when the mortgage ran late, paying for the furnace repair wiring, chase cash when he needed a reset, they'd finally see me, recognize me, maybe even say thank you. But the more I gave, the less I mattered. The phone buzzes again, skittering slightly across the table. I don't reach for it. I already know what the message says. It'll be a variation of the same line. Call us back. Your dad's stressed. Don't you care about your family? Followed by Chase's signature tone, that sarcastic bite of entitlement he's never outgrown. They didn't call this often when I was sending them money every month. Back then, it was mostly short texts. Need help? $W bill, or can you spot me till Friday? But once I stopped once, the deposits ended, their concern bloomed like mold. Suddenly, I was important again. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a source. A stream that had gone dry. I take a sip from the mug, barely warm now, and glance at the small bookshelf across the room. A line of thrifted novels, a few journals, and a photo frame with no picture inside. I never got around to filling it. I told myself I'd wait for a moment worth capturing. Maybe I still am. It's strange how silence can feel like suffocation when you're inside a family that only speaks in crisis, but now, on this side of the noise, silence feels like oxygen, like freedom. I think back to the night I left. I remember the exact moment the door clicked shut behind me, the way the porch light flickered overhead. I remember standing on the sidewalk looking back one last time, not with regret, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I wasn't escaping. I was finally choosing myself. And here, in this quiet apartment, where the floorboards creak and the radiator hums in the corner, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but the start of peace. The first inch of space between what they wanted from me and what I need for myself. The phone buzzes once more, then stops. The silence afterward is full whole and mine. I sink deeper into the couch, letting the fabric hold me. For the first time in a long time, I'm not waiting for someone to ask me where I've gone. I'm not hoping for a text that says we miss you, because now I finally understand the only voice I needed to hear was my own. And she's whispering, stay gone. I got my first job when I was 16, not because I wanted extra spending money, but because I knew nobody else was going to look out for me. While other girls from school were getting picked up by their parents in warm cars with snacks waiting in the back seat, I rode a rusted bike 4 blocks to a pastry shop downtown, where I wiped tables, mopped floors, and learned to keep my head down. My first paycheck wasn't big, but it was enough to buy a second-hand laptop from a pawn shop, the only thing that helped me keep up in AP classes when the family desktop kept freezing mid-assignment. I still remember handing over the cash, all singles and coins, in a zippered pouch I'd been carrying around like it was treasure. No one at home asked where I got the money. No one asked if I'd eaten that day or how my shift had gone. But when the Wi-Fi bill came up short that month, my mom asked if I could cover it just this once. Of course I did. That was the start of the pattern. It never felt like a single moment, more like a slow absorption, like water soaking into a paper towel until it's too soaked to dry anything else. I started paying little things here and there. Gas for Dad's truck when he couldn't find his wallet, groceries when Mom's card declined, a new pair of shoes for Chase when he said he needed them for an art show that never happened. By the time I graduated high school, I was fully integrated into the household finances. Not in name, not on paper, but in practice. I kept a notebook, nothing fancy, just a lined composition book where I wrote down every dollar I spent on the family rent support, phone plans, medication, Chase's online classes. I never planned to show it to anyone. It was just something I needed for myself, a way to make the math match the feeling. And the feeling was this: the more I gave, the less I existed. Chase, 4 years older, had dropped out of college after 2 semesters and bounced between odd jobs for nearly a decade: barista, delivery driver, part-time tattoo apprentice. He was charming, though. That was his gift. Mom always said he had potential. Dad called him creative. When he lost jobs, they consoled him. When he racked up debt, they made excuses. Chase was their dreamer, their sensitive soul, their son who just needed time. Me, I was dependable, not gifted, not struggling, just the one who made things work. When I got a full scholarship to Jefferson University, no one threw a party. They just asked if I'd be coming home on weekends to help take Dad to his appointments. When I got hired at Jefferson Mutual as a junior analyst, my mom's only comment was, "So far away. What if we need the car?" I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself it was just who they were, not emotional, not expressive. I told myself that being needed was close enough to being loved. But the truth is, every time I walked into that house, I disappeared a little more. I became a walking bank slip, a lifeline they used without ever asking how deep the well went. When they wanted to repaint the kitchen, I pitched in. When Chase wanted to try another online certification, I paid the enrollment fee. They never used the word help. They used words like, "just this once, and you're the only one who understands." And I did understand. I understood that if I didn't step in, the bills wouldn't get paid. I understood that if I didn't fix things, they'd stay broken. I understood that my presence was transactional, valued only when it came with a transfer confirmation. Birthdays came and went. One year no one called. I found out later. They were out of town visiting my aunt in North Carolina. Chase got a celebration every year. Not big, not lavish, but consistent. A cake, a card, a round of toasts about how resilient he was for pushing through. I had pushed too, through 16-hour workdays, through skipped meals, through weekend grocery runs and quiet tears in stairwells at work, when I realized I had nothing left to cover my own electric bill. But no one toasted that, no one even noticed. I thought for a long time that if I just kept going, something would shift, that loyalty would be enough, that one day they'd say, "We see what you've done, we're proud of you." But that moment never came. The love in my family didn't live in words or presence. It lived in assumption. It lived in convenience. And if I was honest, that understanding hurt more than anything they'd ever said to me, because it meant that no matter how much I gave, it would never count as love. It would only ever count as expected. The grocery bags felt heavier than usual, even though I had packed them light salmon vegetables, a few frozen meals, a bottle of the elderberry syrup my mom liked for winter. I carried them in from the car without asking for help. I never asked, I just showed up like always. It was Sunday, the routine day I'd worked late Friday and picked up an extra project over the weekend, but I still made the 40-minute drive out to their house. I'd stopped by the co-op downtown, spent just over $100, made sure to pick items that could stretch a few meals. I even included the kind of green tea my dad liked, the one that came in the metal tin. I opened the back door without knocking. It was habit. My mother was already in the kitchen wiping down the counter, even though it was spotless. She didn't look up. "Hey, I said setting the bags down I brought." "We need to talk," she cut in, her voice clipped. I paused, still holding the last bag in my arms. "Okay," I said slowly. "What's going on?" She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter. "What you've been sending lately, it's not enough." The silence stretched. I blinked. The mortgage payments. All of it. The house groceries. Meds. Your father's back has been acting up again. The roof still leaks. The bills are piling up, Aaron. I nodded, once trying to stay calm. I've been covering the mortgage, the prescriptions, the groceries. "It's not enough," she repeated louder this time. "You live alone, you work in finance, you make good money. Meanwhile, we're here trying to get by every month. It's not fair." The last bag in my hand started to slip. I set it down slowly next to the untouched others. Dad stepped into the room. He had that look on his face, the one he always wore when I was a teenager coming home too late. Disappointed, stern. Like he was preparing to deliver a sentence, not have a conversation. "She's right," he said. "You do live alone. No kids. Big paycheck. Doesn't seem fair. We're struggling while you get to save up." That word, save, landed like an insult, as if being financially responsible was selfish, as if not being in debt was some kind of betrayal. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to ask if they remembered all the money I'd already sent, the $1, $200 here, the $500 there, but I knew they did. They just didn't count it because counting it would mean admitting they expected it. A voice drifted in from the living room. "You're making a big deal out of this." Chase. He was on the couch again, legs stretched out, controller in hand. I could see the screen flashing from the hallway. Some game, something loud and dramatic. He didn't even bother to get up. "It's not like you're hurting," he said without looking over. "Sharing a little shouldn't be a problem. You've always helped." I stared at him, stunned. "I've always helped because you never did." He chuckled like I'd said something cute. "There you go again." Mom stepped in, tone sharp enough. "Aaron, don't disrespect your brother." I turned to face her fully. Disrespect for stating the truth. Her lips tightened into the expression I knew too well, the one she wore when she thought she was being cornered and needed to regain control. Her voice dropped slow and cutting. "If it's that much of a burden," she said, "then maybe don't come back." There it was. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just a sentence that sliced cleaner than anything else ever could. Not a command, a dismissal, not a fight, a forfeiture. No one moved. Dad said nothing. Chase kept playing. My mother stood still, arms crossed, like she'd just solved something and was waiting for me to confirm it. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up the last grocery bag, the one still sitting near the sink, and placed it on the counter without unpacking it. I didn't touch the salmon or stack the yogurt in the fridge like I usually did. I didn't write the label on Dad's pill bottle to remind him when to take it. I didn't refill the teapot. I walked toward the door. Chase muttered something so dramatic, or, "What else is new?" but I didn't give him the dignity of turning around. The door clicked behind me the same way it had 6 months ago. My car was cold. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes, hands on the steering wheel, the sound of my own breathing louder than the engine when I finally turned the key. I had brought food. I had brought help. I had brought everything I thought family meant, and all I got back was this. "Then don't come back." So I didn't, and I wouldn't. For the first time in years, my mornings belonged to me. No buzzing phone on the nightstand, no text notification at 6:17 a.m. saying someone forgot to pay the water bill. No, just a reminder from Mom. No, can you send a little extra this week from Dad? The silence at first was startling, but then it softened, became something almost holy. I kept the phone, but I muted everything. Deleted Chase's number, blocked. Mom and Dad removed every old banking link I'd set up to send auto transfers. I even unsubscribed them from my payment app. History one small act at a time, severing every invisible wire I used to confuse for love. Mornings started with light. I'd rise before the alarm most days and open the blinds to let the gold spill in across the floorboards. I'd brew coffee slowly, not rushing to meet anyone else's crisis, and drink it on the little balcony overlooking the street. Richmond moved at its own pace. Some days I'd hear the soft clatter of someone setting out a cafe patio. Other times, just birdsong and the wind lifting leaves. It took almost a full month for my shoulders to drop when I heard my phone vibrate, for the tightness in my stomach to fade when I opened my banking app. I'd grown used to watching my balance disappear in real-time paycheck and emergency out groceries for me, then a car repair for them. But now, each time I checked, there was a little more. A small growth, a quiet record of my own survival. I made a spreadsheet not for them. For me. A personal ledger titled Aaron's Peace Fund. I wasn't saving for anything big. Just stability, just a cushion that wasn't going to collapse under someone else's demands. My groceries were cheaper, my apartment was smaller, but for the first time I was breathing air that hadn't been filtered through someone else's crisis. By the second month, I started sleeping through the night. No sudden jolts awake, no dreams of overdue bills or forgotten deadlines. I'd go entire weekends without checking my phone, and when I did, it was mostly work emails, the occasional message from colleagues or a meme from Cassie at the office. Nothing that carried the weight of guilt. I was free. Until I wasn't. The message came late on a Thursday, just as I was heating up leftovers from the night before. I had just slipped into sweats, lit a candle, and queued up a documentary I'd been meaning to watch for weeks. I glanced at my phone out of habit, expecting a weather alert or a delivery update. It was a text from a number I hadn't blocked Dad's second line, the one he rarely used. Simple, unemotional 2 sentences. "Why didn't you pay the mortgage this month? The bank's pressing us again." I stared at the screen. I read it once, then again and again. For a second, I thought I had misread it. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was a glitch. But no, it was time-stamped. 7:42 p.m. sent just minutes ago. My heart thudded once deep and low like it was trying to tell me something. My hands began to sweat. The room around me faded. What did he mean? Why didn't I pay the mortgage? I hadn't paid anything in over 6 months. I had blocked them. I had removed every trace of my involvement I had left. And yet, the message assumed I hadn't left at all, that I was still in orbit, that my silence was temporary, not permanent, that it was my job still to pay. I sat down slowly on the edge of my couch, the heat from the microwave forgotten food fogging up the kitchen window. There was no guilt, not at first, only shock. Then the guilt came in slow, thick waves, just as I knew it would, like a tide that never really recedes, only pretends to. I heard my father's voice in my head, softer this time. It's not personal. I heard my mother's sigh. I heard Chase's mocking laugh from that last conversation. I closed my eyes and tried to push the nausea down. I had worked so hard to detach, to breathe without flinching, and with one message it all came roaring back. Not because I missed them, but because I hadn't realized until that moment how deeply I'd been replaced by obligation. Not loved, not missed, just expected. I opened my banking app again this time, not to check a number, but to remind myself it was still my account, still intact, still mine. And this time it was going to stay that way. The message sat there like it was waiting to be read again. Why didn't you pay the mortgage this month? Not, can we talk? Not, are you okay? Just that. I sat at the kitchen table long after the microwave timer beeped and fell silent. The candle I'd lit earlier had burned halfway down. The scent of lavender and eucalyptus now felt out of place, too soft for what was unfolding. I opened my laptop hands, steady but cold. I hadn't logged into the mortgage portal in months, intentionally. That part of my life, the part tied to their house, was supposed to be done, finished. But now the silence I'd fought for felt too fragile to trust. I typed in the old login fingers, moving on muscle memory. I had saved the credentials in a document labeled Family Essentials, a joke in hindsight. The portal loaded slowly, too slowly, like it knew what it was about to show me and was giving me a second to turn back. The page blinked to life. A dashboard appeared. Mortgage status. Past due. Last payment received 8 months ago. Total outstanding balance $6,480. Account status. At risk of foreclosure. I stared at the numbers, then stared harder. 8 months ago. I had stopped helping 6 months ago, which meant the payments stopped 3 full months before I did. I blinked at the screen, then scrolled down to the transaction history. Each line was like a punch. There it was, month after month, every transfer I'd made during those final 90 days. $980, $1.20, $10.50. All labeled mortgage support. My own annotations careful and optimistic. October final payment. Last one for now. I had even added a smiling emoji to one of the entries, like a fool. But none of those funds made it into the mortgage account. The system clearly showed it. The last payment processed was a full 3 months before I walked away. I did the math. 980 plus 1020 plus 1050. 3050. $3,050 sent after they stopped paying the bank. No explanation, no pause, no heads up. They just kept taking. I sat back in my chair, my hand covering my mouth like it could somehow hold in the nausea crawling up my throat. The betrayal didn't feel like a scream. It felt like sinking, slow and steady, 1 inch at a time. I opened my bank app next, just to confirm, just to prove I hadn't imagined the transfers. There they were, lined up neatly, withdrawals from my account deposits sent to theirs, each one marked as Family House Urgent. But nothing on their end had moved. No payments made, no balance reduced, no attempt. It wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. I needed to hear it from someone else. A stranger. Someone who could tell me with a neutral voice that what I was seeing was real, that I wasn't spinning a false narrative out of hurt. I dialed the mortgage bank, pressed 3 for account services, then 1 for verification. I answered each security question without missing a beat. Account holder name, Charles Whitaker. Authorized payee, Aaron Whitaker. Hi, my name is Aaron. I used to help manage this account for my parents. I said I just wanted to verify the last few payments made. The woman on the line was polite, her voice smooth, practiced, probably in a cubicle somewhere, sipping coffee unaware that she was about to collapse the last bridge holding my trust. Give me a moment while I pull up the record, she said, a click of keys, a short pause. Okay, so I'm seeing the last successful full mortgage payment posted 8 months ago. There have been no payments applied since. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Are you sure? I asked already, knowing the answer. No partials, no late postings. No, ma'am. The account is currently flagged for collections. The last 3 months are marked as unaddressed. Okay, I said softly. That's all I needed. She thanked me, read off a standard closing line, and the call ended with a polite goodbye. The moment the call disconnected, I let my head drop into my hands. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant, what it proved. They hadn't just forgotten to pay the mortgage. They hadn't just mismanaged it. They hadn't been confused. They had received my help, asked for it, and then chosen to do something else with the money. And they never told me. Not once. They let me keep believing I was holding up the house when really they'd already let it fall. I didn't call right away. I needed a night to sit with it, to make sure I wasn't reacting out of heat, but from something colder, quieter. I printed out the statement from the bank, 8 months of missed mortgage payments, all marked in bold red. I stapled it to a cover sheet where I'd written the dates I had sent money $3,050 unaccounted for. In another life, I might have crumpled the papers or cried over them, maybe sent a text begging for answers, but not now. I waited until the next morning when the light was clean and I'd had a full cup of coffee. I sat at my small kitchen table, the papers in a neat stack beside my laptop. Then I called. The line rang 3 times before my mother answered. Aaron, she said, as if I were a long-lost daughter suddenly found. I want to talk, I said evenly now. She jumped in before I could go on. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your father's stressed out. Chase hasn't been sleeping. And the bank. I know I interrupted. I spoke to the bank. Silence. I logged into the mortgage account. The payments stopped 8 months ago, I said, but I continued sending money for 3 more months after that. Do you remember that? She hesitated. Well, things got tight. The car needed repairs. Chase had that dental work. I wasn't told any of that. I said, you said the money was for the mortgage. Her voice lifted defensive. And it was? At first, but things changed. You don't understand how hard it's been here. I understand perfectly. I said I just didn't know I was being lied to while I was draining my savings. Her tone sharpened. Don't accuse us like that. We did what we had to do. You cut us off. What were we supposed to do? Aaron, just drown. Before I could respond, another voice cut in Chase. You're so dramatic, he muttered. It's just money. You act like we stole your identity or something. I took a breath. I sent money specifically labeled for the mortgage. I said calm but cold. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't random. I was helping under a clear agreement. You broke that. You never told me you stopped paying. You just kept taking. My father's voice joined now quiet, worn. Sweetheart, we didn't know how to say it. We were embarrassed, but we didn't mean harm. We thought maybe you'd send the money and we'd get caught up later. 8 months isn't later, I said. It's willful. He sighed heavily. Don't do this. Don't make it worse than it has to be. We're family. You used me, I replied. And now that I'm not handing over money on demand, suddenly I'm the problem. Mom jumped back in, voice rising. We raised you, we supported you through college. This is how you repay us. No, I said you didn't support me. I earned a full scholarship. I paid my own rent. I worked full-time while taking night classes. The only thing I didn't do was ask for help because I knew you'd already given all of it to Chase. Oh, so now we're comparing siblings, she snapped. Real mature. I'm not comparing, I said. I'm stating facts. There was a beat of silence. Then Chase laughed again, bitter and smug. This is who you've always been. Self-righteous. Cold acting. Like you're better than everyone else because you learned how to use a spreadsheet. I didn't respond to him. I just moved the stack of papers in front of me and ran a finger down the printed summary. I have documentation. I said full receipts. I called the bank. I confirmed the payment schedule. I've printed every transfer I made after you stopped paying. What are you going to do? My mother said sharply. Sue your own family. No, I said. I'm done giving you my time, my money, and my breath. My father started to speak again. Aaron, please, don't let this be the way we fall apart. I stood from my chair. The windows behind me glowed with soft light, the room calm in a way their house never was. You let this fall apart, I said. Not me. I was the only one holding it together. More silence. Then Mom, one last time. So you're just walking away after everything we've been through? I stared at the bank statement, the neat column of overdue balances. Yes, I said, slowly, clearly. You made your choices. Now live with them. And then I ended the call with 5 words, soft enough to cut deep. Then lose it, not mine. I started with the small things. The shared folder labeled house expenses deleted. The recurring payment templates to my parents' account erased the Venmo history that once read like a timeline of emergencies gone scrubbed clean with a long sigh and the push of a button. Then I logged into the old utility account, the one still tied to their address. For some reason I hadn't canceled it yet. Maybe a part of me was still tethered to the habit of rescuing them, but not anymore. I clicked Remove Payment Method. A pop-up asked, Are you sure you want to proceed? I clicked, Yes, I was sure. The next day, I called my cell provider and requested a new number. It took less than 10 minutes. Just a handful of security questions, a small fee, and a calm voice saying, All set. Your new number is now active. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. There was no music swelling in the background, just quiet. A simple, clean break. I held the phone in my palm afterward and watched as the first unknown caller notification rolled across the screen and then disappeared on its own. Blocked before it even had a chance to ring. I changed my emergency contact at work from my father to a colleague named Kara, someone I barely knew but trusted more than the people who used my love like a line of credit. I updated my HR file, closed the old family group chat, and logged out of every cloud account I'd once shared with Chase when he needed Photoshop or editing tools just for a few weeks. Piece by piece, I unwound myself from their world. The messages didn't stop, of course. They came faster now, more chaotic. From numbers I didn't recognize, some I did, I never opened them, but the previews were enough. You're heartless. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Are you proud? You've changed. This is your fault. Don't forget who raised you. Each one landed differently. At first they stung, then they just buzzed past like gnats. I started keeping my phone on. Do not disturb permanently. I turned off the previews. I allowed only 3 people to bypass the block. My boss, my bank, and Kara from HR. The rest could scream into the void. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't crafting a revenge story. I was detaching the way you pull your hand away from a stove once you finally feel the burn. It didn't matter if they understood why. What mattered was that I no longer needed them to. I stopped pacing near the phone when it vibrated. I stopped checking my bank account every morning out of fear that I'd been tricked into another auto transfer. I started taking my coffee on the balcony again, not hunched over, not anxious, just breathing in the air as it came. Every week, I deleted more voicemails, old shared photo albums, birthday calendar reminders I didn't need anymore. The space it opened up wasn't just digital, it was physical. My body felt lighter, like it was no longer twisted into shapes trying to make everyone else comfortable. One night, I got a message from Chase that I almost read just out of habit. I caught one sentence before swiping it away. You were never good at being part of this family anyway. I stared at the screen for a second. Then I set the phone down face first and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized how absurd it had all been. How many years I had spent trying to earn something they never intended to give. It wasn't about family, it never had been. It was about access. And now the access was revoked. My apartment was still the same small, quiet, nothing extravagant, but everything in it belonged to me. Every plate, every chair, every chipped mug and folded blanket I had chosen this life. And slowly, I was learning to enjoy it. There were hard moments. Of course there were. I'd wake up some nights with my heart racing. A flash of guilt sinking in before I even opened my eyes. But I had learned to breathe through those moments to remind myself that survival isn't selfish, that boundaries are not betrayals, that love isn't proved through emptying your pockets until nothing is left. The messages slowed after a while. Maybe they got tired. Maybe they realized I wasn't coming back. Maybe they finally saw what I had learned the hard way when someone cuts off your supply. They're not abandoning you. They're saving themselves. It came on a Wednesday. The sky was still the soft color of sleep, that shade of silver blue before the sun decides what it wants to be. I was standing in the kitchen barefoot waiting for the kettle to finish its quiet rattle toward boiling. I had just washed my face and pulled my hair into a knot, still damp at the ends. My phone buzzed once, the kind of buzz that meant a voicemail had landed. No call, just the tail end. A name I recognized even before I looked. Chase. I didn't touch it right away. I let the kettle whistle, poured the water over a sachet of rooibos tea, the kind that smelled like vanilla and rain. I carried the mug to the window, cracked it open just an inch, and let the early air drift in cool, almost minty, carrying the scent of a neighbor's laundry soap. The message waited. I told myself I wouldn't listen. I had no reason to. I had broken the loop, but curiosity can be a quiet predator dressed up like closure. So I pressed play. His voice spilled out sharp, fast, still drenched in that unearned righteousness that used to tie my stomach in knots. You know what, Aaron? You ruined everything. I didn't flinch. I just leaned on the counter watching a single bird land on the wire outside. This whole thing with the house, that's on you. You walked out and left us to deal with the mess. You could have kept it together. You had the means. But no, you had to make it all dramatic. The bird fluttered away. My tea steeped deeper into amber. You think cutting us off makes you some hero? You're not better than us, Aaron. You're just cold selfish. You abandoned your family for what silence? There was a pause, a breath, then softer, bitterer. You don't get to pretend you're free just because you blocked a few numbers. Click. That was it. No goodbye, no request, just blame wrapped in static. I set the phone down, didn't replay it, didn't analyze it, just let it sit for a second before lifting it again and pressing delete. The message vanished. A small box popped up, voicemail permanently deleted. No option to recover. No safety net. Good. I moved slowly after that, pouring the tea into my favorite cup, the wide, curved one with the tiny chip on the handle. I never minded. I wrapped my hands around it, the heat sinking into my palms. Outside, the sky was shifting to pale gold. Sunlight stretched lazily across the floorboards, touching the tips of my toes like it had been waiting for me to notice. I carried the mug to the window again, opened it wider this time. The city hadn't fully woken yet. A car rolled by. A bike bell chimed somewhere in the distance. Somewhere, someone was frying something in butter. The whole block smelled warm. I breathed in. Chase's voice was gone. And with it, something unspoken lifted from my spine, the constant bracing, the reflexive need to defend, to explain, to prove. There was a time, not long ago, when that message would have wrecked me. I would have stood in the kitchen, clutching my phone, pacing between fury and guilt, rehearsing what I wanted to say, what I deserved to say. But now I just stood still, quiet whole. Vindication didn't come with fireworks. It didn't need a witness. It came in the absence of reaction, in the heartbeat that stayed steady, in the breath that didn't hitch. I looked at my phone again. One less notification, one less ghost. The air through the window curled around my shoulders. I pulled the sleeves of my sweater over my hands and leaned into it. He was wrong. I hadn't walked away for silence. I walked away for peace. And this stillness, this breath, this ordinary morning was proof I had finally found it. The message came just before noon. I saw the preview when I flipped open my phone to check the weather. A simple notification, no punctuation, just, "Aaron, we're out of options. Please just this once, Dad." I didn't open it. Instead, I turned the screen face down on the table and poured myself another cup of tea. Peppermint this time, sharp and clean. I carried it to the window where the afternoon light was beginning to stretch toward warmth. Outside, the sky was clear. A dog barked in the distance. The world kept turning. The message stayed on my screen like a final plea scribbled in pencil light, smudged, trying to make itself permanent without pressing too hard. I didn't hate my father. I knew he believed in some quiet corner of himself that reaching out was an act of humility, that please was the word that would pull me back, that asking now, after all this time, still counted as connection. But what he didn't understand, what none of them ever really understood, was that love and obligation are not the same thing. Not anymore. I sipped the tea, held it in my mouth longer than usual. It calmed the tremor I hadn't noticed in my chest. Not panic, not fear. Just the last residue of being asked to carry more than I should. The message blinked again, still unread, still waiting. I picked up the phone, clicked into the notification, but didn't tap the message open. Instead, I moved my thumb toward the 3 dots in the corner and pressed archive. A soft swipe, a quiet decision. The message disappeared into a folder I'd labeled a week earlier, for record not response. I didn't need to delete it. I wasn't erasing what happened. I was keeping it where it belonged in the past, tucked away, no longer shaping my next move. This was not vengeance. This was not coldness. This was peace. I set the phone down, pressed both hands to the windowsill, and looked out across the quiet city street. There were children playing somewhere, their laughter threading through the breeze like bird song. A neighbor pushed a stroller slowly, one hand resting on the handle, the other holding a coffee cup. The scene was so ordinary, it felt holy. I thought about what it meant to let someone else suffer consequences they spent years avoiding, to stop running into every fire just because you were the only one holding a bucket. They were out of options. But I had mornings that started with stillness, evenings that ended with warmth. I had money that stayed in my account past Friday. I had a lock on my front door that no one expected to walk through uninvited. I had my own name on every lease, every bill, every plan. I had room to breathe. For so long, my family's survival had been built on my silence. The quiet way I showed up, paid, fixed, bridged, covered. But silence is not the same as agreement. And now I was done being useful at the expense of being whole. I turned away from the window, walked into the kitchen, and rinsed out my mug. I let the water run a few extra seconds just to hear the sound of it soft and steady. Something I controlled. I dried the cup gently, placed it back on the rack, and smiled when it landed without a clink. There was no call back, no urgent reply, no second message begging for more. Just the light. Just the silence. Just me. And that was enough. For years I paid. I carried, I stayed, I kept the lights on the water running the balance stable in a home that was never really mine. I told myself I was strong because I could carry the weight, but the truth is I had been mistaken. Strength isn't how long you endure. It's knowing when to finally put something down. And when I walked away, not in anger but in quiet refusal, they called it betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal. It was survival. It was choosing myself in a story where I'd only ever been the background support, where love was a transaction affection, a receipt and loyalty, something they expected me to sign over without pause. They said I'd changed, that I was cold now, distant, ungrateful. But I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped pretending. Stopped pretending their comfort was worth more than my exhaustion. Stopped confusing silence for respect. Stopped draining every last drop of who I was in order to keep everyone else from falling apart. I walked away with nothing but my breath, my name, and a tea-stained notebook of payment histories. But even that, even just those things felt like freedom. Because I was no longer useful, I was finally free. There are still days when I wonder if I went too far. If choosing peace means I'll always be labeled the ungrateful one. But then I remember how light it feels now, how I can stand at the window in the early morning and not brace myself for another emergency, how I can hear my phone vibrate and not flinch, how I can sleep through the night without rehearsing excuses or preparing to rescue anyone. And I realize this isn't loneliness. It's clarity. If you've ever been called heartless for saying no, if you've been made to feel guilty for drawing a boundary, if your love has ever been measured by how much you gave and not by who you were, then I want you to hear me now. You're not alone. You're not wrong for wanting peace. You're not selfish for wanting space. You're not cruel for refusing to be the constant fixer. There comes a time when choosing yourself is the only way forward, and if that moment is here for you, take it. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that leaves you empty. I'm still learning how to live without guilt, still learning how to be present in a life I chose, not one I inherited. But every day gets quieter, and in that quiet, I've found something I never knew I needed, a version of me that isn't for anyone else to use. So, if this story sounds familiar, if you've been there or are still trying to leave, tell me, speak it, share it. Leave a comment if you've ever been the one holding everything together, or if you've ever finally said, no more. Because sometimes to move forward, we just need to know we weren't the only ones. And you're not, you never were.